This is Bishop Craig in Lansing, and this is take one for the week of November 3. Peace be with you. Again, I'm feeling like the slug of the staff this week. Pastor Sprang will be leading the Generosity Project on Sunday at University in East Lansing. The Generosity Project, I talked to you about a little bit about it last week. That's a stewardship program process that involves whole families. It's still not too late to register. I may have gotten the times wrong on last week's video, so consult the newsletter and stuff. That's above my pay grade. I really hope that we have a really good turnout for this event. Pastor Roseanne Anderson on Thursday and Friday will be meeting with our candidacy committee. The candidacy committee is the group that accompanies and evaluates and recommends as people journey toward professional ministry, either as a pastor or a deacon. Candidacy committee helps them discover their gifts and name their growing edges, and provides a plan to help them successfully chart the candidacy process. So we're really grateful because our synod we're on the upside. We're growing in our number of candidates. So I would say to you, it's one of our Living Stone goals. If you have this itch you can't scratch, that maybe God is calling you to be a pastor, and you want to talk it through with someone, be in touch with Pastor Anderson, because she's really good at helping people discern, and she's really good at helping people find a way to pursue what may be God's call. And if you know someone who you think would be a good pastor or deacon, it is not too early, even elementary school, to place that thought in their head and heart. And to provide them with opportunities to participate in the life of the church. It wasn't fancy for me, but I preached my first sermon, I think, yes it was, in 8th grade confirmation class to my Sunday school class. And then I got to do it for a midweek Lenten service in 10th grade. The pastor was pretty clear sitting with me and making sure that the sermon was right, but I got to do it. So it's not too late. It's never too early. It can be too late to put the thought of someone being a pastor or a deacon in somebody's head and heart. So I encourage you to do that. We're all preaching this Sunday. I will be at University in East Lansing for their worship expression. It has a global theme. Pastor David Sprang will be at Trinity in Battle Creek as Pastor Kirsten Pretty begins her service as the member of the ELCA Church Council from Michigan, from the Lower Peninsula of Michigan. So we pray for Pastor Kirsten, and the ELCA Church Council as they begin another year. And Pastor Anderson will be at Trinity in Hillsdale. One of the things that we like to do as a synod staff that not everybody knows about is sometimes when we sense a pastor could use a little bit of a break, we show up or we call them and say, how about letting us preach? So, pastors, if you sense you need a real break, or congregational leaders, if you think it would be good for your pastor to have a weekend away, let us know and we try to help. So that's kind of what's happening. The text for Sunday is really kind of fun. It's a hypothetical case because what the Sadducees asked Jesus about probably wasn't being practiced. And what I've learned as a bishop is never to answer hypotheticals, because you can't win. But Jesus does. In Genesis and Deuteronomy, we read that if a woman's husband dies, too early at a young age, it is the obligation of the brother-in-law to take her as a wife and to produce children with her so that the dead brother's bloodline doesn't end and so that the wife is protected. Makes sense in a culture where people were really vulnerable, women especially, like was probably going on in Genesis and Deuteronomy. This was not being practiced at the time of Jesus, but to put him to the test, the Sadducees multiply this by 7 and say, okay, if the 7 brothers die and the woman has married them all, in the resurrection, whose wife will she be? And I love Jesus' answer because it's twofold. First of all, he says that all are alive to God. All are alive to God. I think that's really good news, that we wonder what happens to those we love. We just celebrated All Saints last Sunday. We worry about what happens. Some of us worry about what happens when our loved ones go to the other side or go to heaven or are no longer with us in this life. All are alive to God. All are alive to God, which means God has relationship with them all. And as far as the resurrection, Jesus says, right now we marry and are given in marriage, but we won't be doing that in the resurrection. And for me, that's really good news, because it says that the resurrected life, when Jesus comes in all his fullness, is so beyond our comprehension that even our most cherished things, like marriage, like family, dare I say it, like church, will just pale in the resurrected life. They'll become obsolete and unnecessary. That can be panicky, I guess, to think that our whole frame of reference may change. But the good news is that God's love is bolder, God's grace is bigger, God's life is more alive, more extravagant than we can imagine, than we can even comprehend. And we know, Jesus in the text points to kind of a word play. God says, I am the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, so they must be alive, not I was the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. But we have more to cling to than a word play. We have the good news of Christ's resurrection. We have the promise that we are joined to Christ's death and resurrection in the waters of baptism. We have Christ present in the bread and wine, giving us a foretaste of new life. So we have more than a word play to reassure us of God's promise that all are alive to God, and that the resurrection is bigger and bolder and better than we can imagine. And so we get to dare to live the resurrection now. And part of that may mean setting aside even institutions that we cherish most when they get in the way of the life that God intends and brings for us. And so two thoughts are running through my mind. I love it that in Mark's gospel, the women flee from the tomb and they say nothing to no one because they are afraid. Because they, I think, comprehend that everything has changed, that it is so much, it's so much bigger than Jesus is raised from the dead, and that once we're dead, now we're not. That it's about a whole new understanding of life in the world and after the world. That's one. And two, if even our most sacred practices and institutions, even marriage and family, will become obsolete, then the saying "we've always done it this way" really doesn't mean much, and may be an obstacle to new life. So that's what I think for Sunday. We're into November already. As it gets colder, I hope you enjoy the the changing season. This is Bishop Craig, and peace be with you.